Story 1. My friend's boyfriend scared her as a prank. She sought revenge by waiting for him to fall asleep, then watched a bunch of videos he would dislike on his YouTube account to interfere with his recommendation algorithm. Story 2. I put the wireless mouse receiver into the back of my coworker's computer. Whenever I want to play a prank on him, I open my desk drawer and take control of his computer. Story 3. It was only a few weeks, but a supervisor on a construction site I worked on was complaining about the birds in front of his office. That night, I went to a pet shop and bought a big bag of birdseed. I hid it nearby, and when the coast was clear, I scattered a couple of handfuls. It took a few days, but more and more birds started stopping by to look for food. There were over 30 pigeons out there one morning when he came in. I told him what I was doing one day when he had pretty much given up and was throwing old bread out for the birds. He later asked me to pick up another bag of seed, as he had taken over throwing out seed and ran out. Story 4. Back in the day, I used to cold call in a bad sales job and eventually got bored. When I would ask for Mr. Smith and they would say he was not here, they would ask if they could take a message. I used to leave messages like, "Tell him he was right. It is not going to fit." Or, "Tell him it will have to be the blue one. The red one is not available." Or, "We cannot do 7 o'clock because the cat is not well." If they asked about it any further, which they usually did not, I would say he would know what it meant. I like to think I have left a legacy of people scratching their heads for days. Story 5. Place a single grain of rice on something that belongs to them every day when they are not looking. In a shoe, a pocket, on top of their bag at work, or on their desk. Always rice, always in a different place. Story 6. One of my best friends worked as a section manager in a retail store. He bought a box of about 400 rubber duckies from Amazon and started leaving a single one on his boss's desk at random times. He never said a word to her about it and chose odd times to do it to confuse her. For example, if he came on an off day to shop, he would sneak one in. He would come in 30 minutes before his shift started to do it and stay late to do it as well. He did this for at least 6 months before he was promoted and transferred. On his last day of work, he walked into her office with the box of the remaining duckies and turned them upside down on her desk. She reacted with a mix of hysterical laughter and sobbing, saying, "Oh my God, I thought I was going insane." Story 7. 1. When I was a kid in the 1980s, my neighbor used to go on vacation for 2 weeks every year during the summer. He relied on his friend, my dad, to get his mail and check on his house, which my dad did. My neighbor loved elaborate Christmas lights. Decorating his entire house took a lot of work, so he left them up all year and only turned them on at Christmas time. For 2 weeks of the summer, my dad would turn his friend's Christmas lights on. No one else in the neighborhood knew what was going on. Every once in a while, someone in the neighborhood would mention it, and my dad would act confused because he was. 2. My grandpa used to work with a man during the 1960s who bragged about gas mileage. His whole office would pitch in to buy gas and siphon it into his car so the gas would last much longer than it should, sometimes weeks. He would come in and brag about it, and everyone would laugh. Story 8. One time, my friend Steve was at my house, and the phone rang. The caller ID showed his number, so I knew it had to be his roommate, probably looking for him. I picked up the receiver and immediately asked, "Hi, is Steve there?" There was a pause. Then, "No, he's out." I quickly said, "Cool, I'll try again later. Bye," and hung up. It was probably a good minute before she called back to call me a bastard. Story 9. Working from a shared work computer, I frequently changed a coworker's email signature to completely random quotes unrelated to work. He would never notice, and it became a constant topic of conversation about what Kyle had added to his email that week. Story 10. I put one of those electronic cricket circuits above the false ceiling in my old boss's office. Every so often, between 2 and 15 minutes, it would chirp. It drove him mad. He never did find it. Story 11. Just hand them something and say, "Hey, can you hold this for me?" They usually will and then never ask for it back. See how long they keep it. Story 12. When you talk to them, look at their forehead instead of their face. Story 13. My colleague went on a bachelor party with a friend of mine. Absolutely nothing happened. My friend said it was very tame and there was no controversy. When he returned, he walked past me and I said, "I heard what happened at the party." He immediately turned bright red and said, "What have you heard?" I replied, "Don't worry, your secret is safe with me," and went on with my day. He spent the last week demanding to know what I knew while approaching colleagues and asking if they had heard me say anything. For context, I am known as the quiet one in the office, which made it much more believable. Story 14. Not subtle at all. I used to work for a real jerk who demanded a conference call every Monday at 8 o'clock with around 50 people on the call. He would yell and belittle everyone, calling us all stupid. We never found out who, but someone bought a cheap gag gift that would say, "Forget you" when pressed. They started using it every week on the call, and it drove the boss crazy. He made a huge diagram on a dry erase board tracking who was on the call each week and who was on vacation. It went on for over a year, and he was never able to figure out who it was. Story 15. Say, "I have to go poop." Then remain silent and stand there. Story 16. This is oddly specific but funny. When I was in college, all the theater students went abroad to London, almost as a tradition. I didn't go anywhere because I didn't have the money, but one of the theater students, who was a friendly rival of mine, went to France. While he was gone, I kept telling people he was in London. At first, they questioned it, but I kept insisting. By the time he got back, everyone kept asking him how London was. After 4 months of that, he got really sick of it. Then I edited him into some of the London photos and submitted them to the school study abroad photo contest. They were published on the university's website. It was a great long-term prank. Story 17. My manager, who was very relaxed, had his desk out the back. I noticed once, when he was showing me something on his phone, that he always had near-field communication turned on. He also had a habit of placing his phone on one particular spot on his desk when working. I had a few of these white near-field communication stickers, which are small chips embedded in white stickers that mobile phones read when placed over or near them. This is the same technology as contactless payment systems. You can program the chip to perform actions on the phone. I placed a few stickers on the spot where he usually placed his phone. Since the stickers were white, they blended in perfectly with his desk. I programmed the sticker to open YouTube on his phone and play a specific meme or unusual video of my choosing daily. It happened so frequently that he thought his phone was faulty and reset it, but the problem persisted. He was very confused. Eventually, I confessed my actions, and he found it hilarious. It then became a routine to set his quick response code to a new meme every day when he was away from his desk. Here is an example of the type of content I would assign to the near-field communication sticker. In summary, hidden near-field communication tags linking to silly content when unintentionally scanned are great for lighthearted pranks. Story 18. Work in a diesel mechanic shop. Drop an extra head bolt in your friend's rebuilt pile near the end of the repair. Watch chaos ensue. Story 19. A few months ago, I met one of my neighbors. She told me her and her husband's names. I have seen them around, so I know who her husband is. A few days ago, I was outside and saw him coming the other way. I smiled and waved, saying, "Hi, Bob," as if I had known him for years. He said, "Hi," back, like he just couldn't remember my name at that moment. That's going to be a slow process. I am very distinctive looking, so pretty quickly, he'll be thinking, surely I would remember meeting a 3-foot-tall black woman with green spiky hair. Story 20. As a non-native speaker, my expectations for the comments were completely different. Story 21. My old boss bought a new Harley-Davidson one summer. No matter where he parked, I would put about a tablespoon of oil under it. He ended up taking it back to the dealer twice before he got himself ejected and banned. Story 22. Move something slightly out of place every time you are around them, like tilting a picture frame or adjusting a chair. They will start questioning their sanity. Story 23. Ask them, "Are you sure?" about something and watch the gears turn. Story 24. Take a screenshot of the computer desktop by closing all open windows and moving the cursor off the screen. Press the print screen button and save the image to the desktop. Remove all desktop items and the taskbar. Set the screenshot as the desktop background. Story 25. While talking to someone, stare behind them for some time. It is almost guaranteed that they will also look back. Do this every day without them noticing that you are doing it on purpose. If they ask what is wrong, shrug it off by saying you were just distracted. Story 26. Way back in the days before televisions displayed every little change, you could adjust the volume and brightness without it showing on the screen. My friend and I would take the remote while his little brother was watching the television and very slowly turn down the brightness, one click of the button every 30 seconds. Eventually, it was nearly black, and he could never figure out what was going on. We would claim that we could see the television fine. Story 27. If you know your neighbor has an Alexa, wait until they are out, then shout through their letterbox. Alexa, set alarm for 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, followed by other random alarms and reminders. Use an old Wi-Fi router in your car and name it Surveillance Van Number 2. Then park it in a public car park. Story 28. At work, I developed the habit of making a loud clap when I turned off my computer to go to lunch. One day, I did it simply because I turned off my computer. I heard a man's stomach growl. Story 29. 6 months after we broke up, I realized somehow my Spotify was connected to my ex's Alexa. So now, sometimes at 5 a.m., I accidentally on purpose connect to it and play top 50 most annoying songs of all time. I see the song stop, then I press play again. We go back and forth until he gives up. That is what you get when you sleep with your flight instructor, Brent. Story 30. Switch the M and N keys on their keyboard. Some people will not notice for a while, but every now and again they will press the wrong key. Story 31. During my first semester at college, my roommate always had girls over in our single-room dorm, forcing me to sleep in the common area and shower at the gym. As revenge, I started putting a Jolly Rancher candy inside our bathroom shower head. Every morning they would shower together, but when rinsing off, they would be left with a thin layer of sugar on their skin and in their hair. The girls stopped coming over because they all felt sticky and uncomfortable throughout the day, leading them to blame my roommate. By the beginning of the second semester, he could not get a date, which was the main reason he was in college, so he dropped out. I had the dorm room to myself for the rest of the year. The first change I made was removing the remains of the Jolly Rancher from the shower head. Story 32. During the Cold War, the East German State Security Police, also known as the Stasi, monitored suspected dissidents and enemy agents. They placed bugs in their apartments, and when the occupants were out, they rearranged things. They might hide items or simply move them around slightly. Nothing drastic, suspects would not return to find their homes ransacked as if searched for clues, but things would feel different. The sensation of being watched and subtly manipulated would increase over time until the suspect could not sleep, could not function normally, and became utterly paranoid, unable to distinguish informants from agents. Story 33. If you know someone with a dual-control electric blanket, switch the bottom plugs around. Mom was cold, so she would turn hers up a number. It made Dad hot, so he turned his down one. It took them about 3 nights to figure it out. Sorry, Mom and Dad. Story 34. At an old office job, we played a prank on an older colleague who was not very tech-savvy by changing the speed of his mouse to be very slow. He became frustrated because he had to scroll a lot to barely move the cursor on the screen. We casually suggested that perhaps his mouse was dirty and that he should clean it. He cleaned it with an electronics duster spray, and when he left to put the spray away, we set the mouse sensitivity to high. When he came back, his reaction was so funny that we were physically hurting from trying not to laugh. Story 35. Change their autocorrect so every time they type yes, it automatically changes to yeehaw. Nothing like turning someone into a cowboy without them knowing it. Story 36. Be very nice to them, always. I was a direct store delivery driver. Many of the items you see at the supermarket are direct store delivery, not stocked by the store. For example, Coke, Nabisco, and Hallmark are all stocked by the vendor. We have to deal with receivers at the loading dock. Receivers, in some cases, are trained to be unfriendly with vendors, suspicious of short stocking, etc. One receiver criticized me each time I delivered. He would berate me, insult me, and yell, but I noticed he did it to all vendors. So I indulged him, always smiled, never yelled back, and took all his insults. After all, I was only there for a half hour once a week. Finally, after a year with no one else on the dock but the two of us, he approached me and asked, "Why are you always smiling, never shouting back, taking all the insults I give you and never getting upset? What is wrong with you?" I replied in a soft monotone voice, inches from his face with a look clearly restraining anger. "I'm sorry if I am upsetting you. Please understand that is not my intent. My therapist and I have worked out strategies for times like these so that I do not act out on my inner emotions and get in trouble again. I hope you understand." And I walked out. He never bothered me again. Story 37. I'm a teacher. I like to make that little water droplet sound by flicking my cheek and whistling outward as I do it. My younger kids always ask, "What was that noise?" And I always say, "I don't know. I didn't hear anything." Some I've had for years, and they still haven't figured it out. I just keep gaslighting these children. I get paid for this. Story 38. My brother-in-law upset my younger sister. My older sister decided to teach him a lesson. For the next several months, he began receiving random items via the United States Postal Service with no return address, no letter, and no explanation. What was sent? Sawdust, pocket lint, acorns, twigs, leaves, sand, among a dozen other harmless items. The surprise? My sister did not send all of these items from one location or by herself. She involved her friends and close colleagues, so the postmarks originated from locations across the United States. He received random items from about 28 different states and Canada. Eventually, he started to freak out and wanted to call the police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation before they finally told him. My brother-in-law learned to compromise on home decor decisions going forward. Story 39. Replace all of the breakfast cereal from the box with beans. Story 40. For about 5 years, whenever we were at some random place, we would call a friend of ours and ask for Mr. Sullivan. He would say we had the wrong number, and we would politely apologize and hang up. Sometimes it would happen twice in a week, and other times a month or two would pass. Occasionally, random people we were with would make the call, so it would be a different voice. We were all at a house party one night when someone legitimately called the house with a wrong number. Our friend went on a rant about the constant wrong number he had been receiving for years. That was as good a time as any to break it to him, but he did not actually believe us at first. It was one of those, "I'm not even mad" reactions when he finally put it together. Story 41. I made a veterinary-style clock. I bought an identical electronic clock to the one at the office. It was a normal round IKEA clock with minute, hour, and second hands. I created a circuit that generated ticks of varying lengths. Although the ticks were very accurate when observing the minute hand, the changes in tick length were subtle, up to 5%, with most being much smaller. The effect was that if you were standing near the clock, your brain would pick up on the ticks and sense something was off, but you could not pinpoint exactly what. A few people suspected the clock, but after verifying it showed the correct time, they looked elsewhere for the source of the issue. I had to take it down and put the original one back when the batteries were about to die, but for over 3 months it caused a subtle nagging in the office. Story 42. Jehovah's Witnesses have an online page in my country where you can request a home visit. Approximately every 6 months, I ask for one using my friend's name and address as a way of messing with him. Story 43. It is true what they say about you and never explain anything. Story 44. Get 3 envelopes and mark them 1, 2, and 4. Put $20 in each envelope and place them in random locations in the house. Story 45. 1. Ask, if you could change anything about yourself, what would it be apart from the obvious? And then just leave it at that. 2. Holding open a door for someone but not quite wide enough to actually get through. 3. When a waiter or waitress asks if your food is okay, which is almost every time you have a mouthful, spit it in your hand, say yes, it is good, then put it back in your mouth and carry on eating. Story 46. At a party, walk up to someone you do not know and say, "Hey, I do not care what anybody else says. I think it is perfectly fine that you are here," then walk away. Story 47. Autocorrect. In Microsoft Word, you can create a custom autocorrect list for words or phrases. At work, we made some colleagues have Microsoft Word change the word they to not the. You could also autocorrect the word regards or sincerely to inappropriate phrases. You could be like the apparently kid by autocorrecting and to and apparently. Story 48. Whenever someone gives an answer, just reply without context. That explains so much about you. Story 49. When I was about 14 and my older brother was 17, he was very violent. He made my life miserable. He would take deep naps every afternoon. I would go to the kitchen, get the bottle of Wesson vegetable oil, and put a tablespoon or so in the cap. I'd sneak into his room and, using a Q-tip, dispense tiny drops of oil all over his exposed skin. He was very attractive, so to cover his face, neck, back, and arms with oil was enormously distressing. He was on multiple medications. I probably did this for about 2 years. Do you want to beat up a girl who is half your size regularly? He was bigger, but I was smarter. Story 50. I delay my voice when I see the same supervisor at work. I mouth hey, and then say it without moving my lips. He has asked the other workers if they have noticed, and they act unaware. But when I do it to him, I can see he thinks he is going mad. He has asked the boss if he has noticed me doing it, and he has not because I only do it to the supervisor. It drives him nuts and makes my day better. Story 51. The copying room Karen, who was of course very religious, was territorial, and every day she claimed the copier for 20 minutes. This was in a faculty room where everyone was scrambling each morning. I finally had enough. I got there before her, pulled a ream of paper, and made 500 copies with "Satan owns your soul" written in permanent marker. I placed these back in the copier. When she ran her copies, everything came out with this message on it. She went home and took a few days off. I enjoyed those days immensely. Story 52. When I was a young hospital corpsman in the Navy, we took turns managing the coffee station for the week. Whenever it was my turn, I would switch to decaf for the entire week. Then the following week, I'd switch it back to regular coffee with espresso. Watching everyone in uniform suffer from caffeine withdrawal one week and then act jittery the next was remarkable. When I eventually gained rank and left that command, I taught this little trick to one of my juniors. Some traditions must be upheld. Story 53. When I visited their place, I would turn some of their refrigerator magnets upside down. Story 54. Not subtle, but when I put my dad into an assisted living facility, I was contacted by a priest who asked permission to visit my dad on a regular basis. No hesitation from me. Please do. He used to be devout but slipped away a few years ago. I'm sure he just needs to be encouraged to come back to the Lord. He might seem resistant at first, but please don't give up on him. My dad was a devout atheist, an incorrigible curmudgeon, and a supreme asshole. This gave me great joy. Story 55. Whenever someone asks me to take their picture on their phone, typically at a tourist spot, I quickly take a selfie of myself and then take their picture. I make sure to take a few pictures to bury myself under the camera roll. When I walk away, I enjoy seeing them sift through the pictures only to see my smiling face. Story 56. Say no pun intended and start laughing when there was no pun said. People will laugh along thinking they just missed it. Story 57. We had something called an advent calendar given to us at one place I worked. It starts on December 1st, and you open a door each day to find a nice Christmas-themed picture inside. One colleague of mine was very eager to open his own and kind of celebrated it. So, around the 16th, I took a spare one, carefully cut open the glued parts, and switched all the remaining pictures to other images like cow udders, Dieter Bohlen, or exaggerated images. On the 24th, I drew a flying winged figure. It was impossible to notice it was tampered with when I glued it back together, and I switched it with his. He celebrated opening his windows even more after that, and the whole office came every day to see what was inside his advent calendar. Story 58. Picture this. A 16-year-old boy comes home from an exhausting day, heads to his bedroom, flings himself on his bed, and reaches for the television remote. He presses the button, then presses it harder. Nothing. The fun starts here because I had placed a small piece of black tape over the infrared receiver on his television. There was nothing wrong with the remote itself. This was essential because I knew he would suspect my involvement immediately. His first thought was that I had turned one of the batteries around. Not bad reasoning, I thought. So accusations and denials flew. New batteries were located and inserted. But alas, the problem persisted. It was such fun listening to his frustration and hearing him get out of bed to change the channel. I left it in place for several months. Then, after present opening on Christmas Day, I told him I had a little extra present for him in his room. He watched as I removed the small piece of tape. Marvelous. He is 29 now. Such fond memories. Story 59. A fine misted spray bottle filled with Mountain Dew spray daily on a coworker's workstation or tools will drive them berserk. Story 60. When they say something completely unambiguous, pause, nod, and say, "I see what you did there." Story 61. Have you been crying is always a solid way to mess with someone. Story 62. I would put cotton swabs stained with yellow chapstick in an uptight coworker's trash can when he was not around. Then I started leaving them on the floor so he had to pick them up. Later, I got our boss to casually pull out a cotton swab during a meeting. Story 63. In days of yore, my boss had a desktop push-button landline phone. To mess with his head if he had been especially annoying, we would change the button covers on his phone. Instead of the buttons going 1, 2, 3, etc. horizontally, we would change them to vertical layout. He never spotted it as the 1, 9, and 0 were always in the right place. It drove him nuts, and we would hear him cursing and swearing when he dialed wrong numbers. The following day, we would change the numbers back and so forth. He called the phone repair technician a few times, but we made sure to change it back before he came. He was unpleasant and always very volatile and swore a lot. This gave us great pleasure. Top tip: don't mess with your team. They will get revenge. Story 64. I worked in an office where two coworkers absolutely hated each other. One of them stuck a small dead fish to the backside of the other's desk drawer in her office. The smell that grew from that was absolutely terrible, and no one could figure out where it was coming from. There were no cameras in that part of the office, so it was never proven. They let the person responsible go for other reasons. Story 65. One time our neighbors put a couch on the curb. We decided to take it. A month later, we returned it. We were up all night partying, so we saw the man come out for his morning cigarette and become very confused. Story 66. A colleague sold his car to another colleague but kept a set of keys. During lunch break, he would make small adjustments like slightly changing the rearview mirror or increasing the volume on the stereo. Then, he started moving the car to the adjacent parking spot or reversing it in. At one point, he refueled the car before confessing. Story 67. I had the Netflix application on my phone while my wife was trying to pick something to watch. Every time she selected something, I used my phone to choose Hotel Transylvania 3 on the television. She started to get really mad by the 7th time. She couldn't figure out why that was the only thing that would start. Story 68. Buy a box of old keys. Put keyring tags on them with a note that says, "If found, call, phone number." Then drop the keys around various public places. Story 69. Back in college, I lived with a group of 5 complete knuckleheads in a big house. One of them had a super sweet cat named Riblet. The roommate who owned the cat stole one of my other roommate's boyfriends. The spurned roommate and another roommate took turns defecating in the cat's litter box, but did it infrequently and stealthily enough that the other roommate thought his cat was sick. I feel bad for little Riblet, who I imagine, upon coming to its litter box, was like, "What the heck?" Story 70. When my cousin met an ex-girlfriend of mine, he reached out to shake her hand and said, "Hi, but did not say his name. She was so thrown off, as was I, and we all had a laugh before he finally gave his name. Story 71. Short sheet their bed. Our favorite freshman dorm prank. Story 72. Every time they enter, say, "I will tell you later," to the person you are with and abruptly end the conversation. Story 73. Call someone a random name every time. but never use their actual name. Story 74. This is best done with a small group of collaborators. Leave small notes that say, "I know who you are. I saw what you have done." Story 75. I used to work for a publisher, and for months I was slowly replacing all the authors' headshots that were in a part of the building. I replaced one with Kim Jong-un, another with some actors from The Bill, Jimi Hendrix, the cast from Rainbow, Albert Dryden, and others. I would put the original photo in the back of the frame so it could be easily replaced. I got a call from my old manager about 18 months later when they were moving to a new building, and they finally realized. Story 76. Put a piece of tape over their office phone mouthpiece or earpiece. It happened to me, and I opened an information technology help desk ticket to fix it because I could only talk to people on speaker. The person who did it was a systems administrator and saw the ticket. After he canceled it, he let me off the hook. We both got a good laugh. Story 77. Put a useless note on their desk. Told you, Dave got fired. Then nothing else. Story 78. At one point, I had a job where I came in about an hour before my supervisor did. Every day, I pushed his desk back about 1/4 inch until one day he pulled out his chair, hit the wall, and finally realized his desk was about 2 feet back from where it used to be. Another time, I would put a nickel in his phone handset every few days. It adds just enough weight to be imperceptible, but when you take all of the nickels out, it makes the handset considerably lighter. Your muscle memory causes you to use too much strength and essentially smack yourself in the face with your phone. Story 79. My work colleague likes to adjust the height of my office chair for fun. It gets me every time. Story 80. At work, if someone is unpleasant, you can buy valerian root capsules, open them, and rub the contents on their chair every morning before they arrive. This will cause them to have a very strong, unpleasant odor. If you do this every morning, they will not understand why they smell bad, and everyone will be turned off and disgusted by the odor. Continue this until they decide to leave. Story 81. Randomly take out a garden gnome in the middle of a conversation and hold it for 2 seconds. Then put it away and act as if nothing happened. Do this every time you speak with the person you are focusing on. Story 82. I used to work somewhere with an unlimited supply of medical equipment. I pressure-infused an intravenous bag upstairs, then connected several intravenous lines, and placed the catheter in the ceiling tile right above an annoying coworker's head. Occasionally, someone would go upstairs to turn it on and give him a small squirt. Also, when Oregon did not allow people to pump their own gas, I would slide naked men playing cards into their gas caps so they would not see them. Only the gas pumpers noticed. Story 83. Say, what do you call an elephant that eats leaves? They, what? You, a water drop. Then laugh hysterically and walk away. Story 84. Show up to work for every shift, but be miserable. Do not quit. 4 years at my retail job. I enjoy challenging my bosses. Story 85. Set their clocks ahead by a minute a day. Imperceptible at first, but soon you find yourself commuting to work at 6:15 a.m., wondering why morning rush hour traffic is getting lighter every week. I did this to my parents when I was 13. Story 86. I took the phrase mess with someone too literally, which is why I am a bit disappointed in the comments. I am European. Story 87. A long time ago in my first office job, we had a lovable guy who enjoyed playing small pranks on people, such as setting timers on their phones if left on their desks, changing computer backgrounds if someone left their desk with the computer unlocked, or putting glitter in the tube of a Nerf dart and firing it across the office. The office decided to get revenge. They bought a wireless doorbell, this was around 2011 to 2012, and installed it in the wall of his cubicle. The entire sales floor knew about it and kept quiet. For a year, at random times during the week, they would ring the doorbell with a remote control. Naturally, when he asked if anyone else heard it, everyone denied it completely. We even moved our office to another building, and they moved the doorbell with his desk. I do not know how it ended, but I remember him standing up randomly one day in the middle of work and yelling, "Seriously? Does nobody else hear that?" Those were the good days. Story 88. I can source this. The source is Matt Damon. Apparently, George Clooney emptied his roommate's cat's litter box every morning. The roommate was concerned about the cat's constipation, went to the veterinarian, and everything. After a couple of weeks, before the morning workout, he took a huge exercise bowel movement in the litter box and left. This post has been edited because I made a mistake. Story 89. If a colleague has a standing desk, adjust it slightly higher or lower each day. Story 90. I saw this years ago as work revenge. If you have a boss or coworker you don't like and have their email, type a word repeatedly at the bottom of every email in white font so they cannot see it. The original example used the phrase plastic spoons. So the boss received advertisements for plastic spoons on every site they visited. It is even funnier when it is something odd like that. Story 91. My coworker drinks a lot of water, maybe 6 to 8 bottles a day. Sometimes, when I am bored, I fill his bottle with just a little more water than he drinks. Every time he comes to take a sip, I fill it up a little. Story 92. My old job had a self-serve cafeteria, and there was always a tray of hard-boiled eggs. My friends and I would sometimes put a few raw eggs in there. Story 93. Move the contents of their dresser drawers around. They will be going for socks, but no, that is underwear. Ha, got them. Story 94. When I was raising my daughter alone, I was deployed and earning a private's wage. My upstairs neighbor would constantly pound on the floor if my daughter was crying and complain to the landlord. The landlord was sympathetic and told me to just pound back if it was just a baby crying. Anyway, I bought 2 speakers, ran a line to my computer, and screwed them face up to the ceiling. One where their TV was, one where their bedroom was. I would play Blink 182's What's My Age Again? On repeat at a very low volume, almost to the point where you were sure you couldn't hear it, anytime I wasn't home or if I was on course or deployed. During the night, I'd wear earplugs. I used to see him checking the mail or in the laundry room and always humming the song, then muttering, "Fuck." Story 95. I had a work manager who thought we were making too many copies on the copier. He assigned a password to each employee to track copy usage, and during our monthly meeting, he announced the code and number of copies made. One day, I looked over his shoulder and saw his copier password. I shared it with our entire team. You should have seen his face when he went to read the copy count, and the only person who had made copies was himself, about 10,000 copies. He burst out laughing. Story 96. When I was younger, we had a touch lamp in the living room. I had a Citizens Band radio in my bedroom. I noticed that every time I keyed up the microphone, it would activate the lamp functions. On, bright, brighter, off. I waited for my dad to sit in his recliner to watch television. I would do random patterns with the light. He would get up, touch it, and then sit back down. Once in a while, I would run through all the functions really fast. It was the funniest thing I ever saw. I eventually started laughing and told him. He did not think it was as funny as I did. Story 97. I worked at a restaurant where many people had the same kind of pens. I started covertly taking pens from my buddies' tables. If he saw me bussing, I made sure to give him the signed check back with the pen. I spent 3 months slyly stealing pens from his tables, and he became more and more annoyed. Why are these people stealing my pens? What's wrong with people? I'd say, oh, that's so annoying. Take one of mine. After 3 months, one shift he was ranting about it, and I was giggling behind a corner. A coworker saw me, and I let her in on my joke. She immediately went and told him it had been me the whole time. Story 98. Add a single key to someone's key ring until they notice. Story 99. Move all their furniture 1 centimeter to the left. It is subtle enough so they will not notice. You will watch them bump into things for weeks before they get used to the new positions. Then move everything back. Story 100. Back in the day, I would remove the keycaps on a keyboard and swap the M and N keys. Then I would remap the keyboard so the new N key types an N and the M key types an M. It drove people, especially inexperienced typists, utterly nuts. Story 101. Not sure this is subtle, but I once posted an annoying coworker's phone number in an ad on Craigslist for big cock photos. I used the computer at the library to post the ad. For whatever reason, the library had a login on Craigslist that was public. His phone was his lifeline for his side hustle, and day after day at work he would get explicit pictures. Not sure how long the ad was up on Craigslist, but this went on for at least a week, and he couldn't change his number because he would lose all the side hustle contacts. Story 102. Put glitter in the drawers just a pinch. Trust me, it will get everywhere. Story 103. Move their belongings to places where they usually do not keep them, even within a relatively small distance between the original spot and the new spot. For example, if you live with them, move their favorite ingredient towards the back of the cupboard instead of the front. Move their keys from the hook to the front entrance drawer. Hey, where's my phone charger? It's on the counter where you left it. They did not leave it on the counter, you did. Story 104. I put a button that meows every couple of minutes in a coworker's office. He found it within a couple of days, but it took about 6 people tearing apart his office. Another time, I bought a bag of 200 mini plastic babies used for baby showers and hid them in most of my coworkers' offices. No one suspected me because I'm the super quiet, awkward coworker who hides in her car to eat at lunch. They only figured it out because I can't control my face and can't lie. I don't work there anymore, but I hope they're still finding babies and thinking of me. I taped a sticker of a rainbow rattlesnake that said, "Tread harder, Daddy," on a coworker's and good friend's car, which had a bunch of "Don't tread on me" bumper stickers. I taped it lightly because I didn't want it to get stuck. I had a decent, depending on the day, relationship with the boss whom no one else really liked. He was very complex and you never really knew where you stood with him, but we messed with each other. One day he was being annoying, so as I was leaving his office, I turned around and said, "You know what? I don't care what they say. I think you're a pretty good guy," and walked away while he was yelling for me to come back and tell him who they were. Story 105. My dad has a good story from his office in the 1970s. A colleague was a bodybuilder who maintained perfect form for most movements. He put on a bit of a performance about lifting things. He ate soup every day for lunch out of a thermos. Back straight, arms extended while unscrewing the soup container. His wife bought him a new thermos flask one day, and my dad's colleague saw it and bought an identical one soon after. They filled it with water and superglued the threads. Some days they would switch the flask in the morning, and he would go nuts trying to open it, complaining about his wife cross-threading it. Then they would say, "Ask the new work experience kid. He's stronger than he looks." Do a quick switch and sure enough he would be able to open the flask. It drove him mad for weeks, apparently. Story 106. I used to work at a print shop. My boss was a frequent smoker and would go outside to smoke every hour. One day, I took a full box of paper and put it on his chair. He came in annoyed and moved it. It was about 20 kilograms, so it took some effort to pick it up. I did this 4 more times. By this point, he wasn't really annoyed and just moved the box. The next time he went out, I slipped the plastic strap off the box, opened it, took out 10 reams, resealed the box so it looked new, and placed it on his chair. When he went to pick it up this time, he ended up flinging it to the ceiling because it was 20 kilograms lighter than expected. Story 107. Plug a Bluetooth mouse receiver into their PC and occasionally move the mouse around a bit while they are working. Colleagues of mine did this to a person in the office. It took 3 field support tickets and a nervous meltdown before they figured it out. Story 108. When the active desktop was available on Windows, I had written a web page that set the background image and included a small script. At random intervals, it would display one of several random questions, such as, "Did you forget to turn off the oven?" And, "When was the last time you called your mother?" I set this web page as the active desktop for a sales user at the internet service provider where I worked. I observed her leaving the office at random times in a rush and even caught her on the phone with family. Good times. Story 109. Go low contact and eventually no contact. Remove them from your life. Story 110. I am not sure what subtly means, but have you tried a brick? Story 111. Go to their house and take one shoe. Remove a battery from the television remote. Story 112. Conspire with multiple people whom the person spends time with, such as friends, family, and coworkers. Beginning on the same day and continuing for as long as you want the prank to last, everyone casually drops into conversation. Do you smell that? And acts like something smells bad. Story 113. Go into their pantry and remove all the labels from the canned vegetables and soups. Story 114. I bet the people who are the Jims from the office are being exposed in this thread. Story 115. This was something my dad did from around 1950 to 1995. My dad, let's call him Fred, and his best friend, Bill, were traveling on business when Bill got so drunk he blacked out. Bill remembered that he liked a girl, Lucy, and had been talking to her the night before. My dad could hold his drink and was clear-headed the whole time but told Bill he wasn't sure what really happened between Lucy and him. However, she was quite smitten with Bill. They probably parted ways in the bar that night, or it was a one-night stand. Either way, it was over by the next day. But my dad did not let it end there. My dad started writing love letters to Bill from Lucy, talking about how she wished they could be together, but she was married and her husband would be very upset, and so on. This continued for 20 years, with the letters becoming more and more fantastical, describing how much money Lucy had and how she wanted to run away with Bill. Then my brother got a job with an airline where he traveled internationally in the 1980s. My dad found out his itineraries and wrote letters from various countries and cities, like Paris, Berlin, and Florence, all talking about how Lucy really wished Bill was there with her. He asked my brother to mail each letter from each city so the letters would have postmarks from those locations. This went on for another 25 years. The entire time, Bill would talk to my dad about how he was still charming and a ladies' man. My dad never said a word. When my dad visited Bill's office over the years, Bill would neatly stack Lucy's letters prominently on the corner of his desk, hoping my dad would ask about them. But my dad would just look at them quietly and continue the conversation without mentioning them. For 45 years, my dad never told Bill the letters were from him. Bill found out at his wake. Story 116. I can't be the only person who read this as forget someone. Story 117. This works best in an office with only one bathroom and several workers. Go to a thrift store and buy several pairs of old boots. Place these in all of the bathroom stalls in front of the toilet, positioned as if someone were sitting on the toilet so that only the boots are visible when the stall door is closed. Lock the bathroom stalls from the outside. Now there are effectively no available bathroom stalls. Watch for people to become increasingly desperate for the bathroom to be free. Story 118. Leave a pineapple on their porch or bed. Really, anywhere will work. Story 119. Used to replace most of my supervisor's pens with ones that had run out. Derived great pleasure from his annoyance. Story 120. Our friend group once decided to prank one guy for a month. We made up the name of a group called VXR. Do not ask. And for a month straight, whenever we were all together with the guy, we would say things like, "Sheesh, the new VXR song is so good." And, "I know, right?" The conversations about this group lasted about 2 minutes every couple of days, but the guy was actually very confused. He told us later that he searched for the group on all music platforms and found nothing. He just did not want to ask any of us about it because it seemed like we all knew the band and he did not, and he felt embarrassed to admit it. Story 121. If you are house-sitting for someone, get a bag of 100 small ducks. Place a few around the house and stash the rest back at your house, but leave the empty bag with the label of 100 ducks lying around as if you forgot to throw it away. They will spend a long time looking for ducks that are not there. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.